You think you know England? Most people do. They have done the Tower of London. They have walked across Tower Bridge. They have taken the photograph and gone home thinking they touched something old. Tower Bridge was completed in 1894. It is younger than the light bulb. There are bridges in England so old that Tower Bridge, to them, is modern construction. Bridges that were already 500 years old when Tower Bridge was being drawn up on an architect's desk. And the most extraordinary thing about them is not their age. It is that you can walk across them right now, today, this morning. No ticket, no opening hours, no gift shop, just medieval stone under your feet and the sound of a river that has been running under the same arches since before the printing press existed, before the Black Death, before England was the country you think you know. A brief note before we begin. Every bridge in this video is verified against Historic England's National Heritage List, peer-reviewed historical records, and publicly available academic sources. Dating ranges are taken from the most authoritative available source. Where sources disagree, the most conservative confirmed figure is used. All historical events cited are cross-referenced against published historical records. Here is the only rule for everything that follows. These are not ruins. They are not behind rope barriers with laminated information cards. They are not on a Tuesday to Sunday schedule with a gift shop at the exit. They are functional crossings that people walked, cycled, or drove over this morning without giving them a second thought. Historic England's National Heritage List records hundreds of medieval bridges as scheduled ancient monuments, structures legally recognized as nationally significant. The majority remain in active use. Not because England planned it that way, because they were built well enough that nobody, across 6 or 7 centuries of opportunity, was ever able to make a convincing argument for tearing them down. 10 bridges, ranked not by age alone but by the weight of what has crossed them, what happened near them, and what it actually means that they are still there. By the time we reach Bridge 1, the concept of a new building is going to feel like a very temporary idea. Number 10, Bakewell Bridge, Derbyshire. 5 arches over the River Wye. Grade I listed. Vehicular traffic. Peak District. Still in active use today. The bridge at Bakewell is not trying to impress you. It is wide enough for one careful lane of traffic, and the stone parapet sits at roughly mid-thigh height. It has been there so long that the town built itself around it so completely that removing it would require restructuring the entire road network of a Peak District market town, and the Peak District market town has shown no interest in cooperating. The arches are pointed Gothic rather than the rounded Roman form, and that shape is not ornamental. A pointed arch transfers load outward along the curve and downward into the pier rather than pushing straight down through the structure. The result is a bridge that distributes the weight of everything crossing it far more efficiently than it appears capable of from the bank. Medieval engineers did not have the mathematics to prove why this worked. They had generations of observation that it did. The difference in outcomes, across 7 centuries of crossings, has been negligible. Wikipedia's article on Bakewell Bridge confirms it as a Grade I listed stone arch bridge spanning the River Wye, with dating sources placing construction in the late 13th to early 14th century. Bakewell was a significant market settlement on medieval drove roads, routes along which livestock were walked from northern grazing land toward southern markets. The bridge carried that commerce for centuries. Today it carries visitors crossing to buy Bakewell pudding. The cargo has changed. The arches have not. The parapet on the eastern side carries impact marks consistent with decades of vehicle contact. The bridge survived 7 centuries of horses, livestock, and carts. Its current adversary is a delivery driver reversing without checking his mirrors. The 14th century handled its structural challenges with considerably more grace. Number 9, East Farleigh Bridge, Kent. 4 arches over the River Medway. Kentish ragstone construction. Vehicular traffic. Regarded by architectural historians as among the finest surviving medieval bridges in southern England. What East Farleigh has that Bakewell does not are the cutwaters, pointed stone projections extending from the upstream face of each pier directly into the river current. They are not structural decoration. They split the water flow before it reaches the pier, reducing the lateral pressure that floodwater and fast currents exert on the masonry. Medieval builders working beside rivers learned to read those rivers over time, and the cutwater is what that reading produced. It is practical hydraulics expressed in stone, still functioning exactly as intended after 700 years. The Facebook post from a local heritage group accurately describes the bridge as 4 pointed arches of Kentish ragstone, the 2 central ones with chamfered ribs, built in the 14th century. The Scribd document on the Battle of Maidstone confirms that on June 1, 1648, during the Second English Civil War, General Thomas Fairfax executed a flanking maneuver via East Farleigh Bridge, crossing the Medway to avoid more heavily defended positions and advancing on Maidstone from the south. The Battle of Maidstone was fought that same day, with Royalist defenders driven through the town by parliamentary cavalry. The bridge was a military objective. Men were deciding the future governance of England, and the logistics of that decision ran through this specific crossing. The bridge that served a civil war is now a commuter route in a Kentish village. The commuters do not appear troubled by the transition. The humped profile of the crossing, higher at the center than at either bank, is the medieval solution to drainage, allowing rainwater to run off in both directions. It also forces every modern vehicle to slow. The bridge has never accepted speed as a condition of use. It was built for a world that moved at walking pace. 7 centuries later, it is still insisting on its own terms. Number 8. Aylesford Bridge, Kent. 6 arches over the River Medway. Originally 7 before an 1811 modification merged 2 adjacent arches into a single wider central span. Kentish ragstone construction. Vehicular traffic. And standing in a village that has been continuously settled since before the Anglo-Saxon migration to Britain makes this bridge remarkable for the fact that it is not even close to the oldest thing in the vicinity. Historic England's National Heritage List entry for Aylesford Bridge describes it as constructed of Kentish ragstone with 7 original arches including a central segmental arch and 6 pointed outer arches. The Kent Historic Environment Record confirms the current count of 6 following the 1811 modification. The bridge dates to the 14th century, with some sources suggesting elements as early as the 13th. According to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, written centuries after the events it describes, and treated by historians with appropriate scholarly caution, a significant battle was fought at a Medway crossing near this site in 455 AD, when the Germanic leader Hengist fought Vortigern, king of the Britons. The chronicle's precision for specific dates and locations is debated. What it establishes is that the Medway crossing at Aylesford was sufficiently significant to record. A river crossing that features in foundational documents about the origins of English settlement is not an ordinary river crossing. The Carmelite Friary on the bank, founded in 1242 according to the Friars Aylesford website, and confirmed as a continuously operating religious house, is visible from the bridge parapet. The friary is older than the current bridge. The river is older than both. The decision about where to place the bridge's piers, made by reading this specific stretch of the Medway in the medieval period, is still the structural logic the crossing stands on. Subsequent reinforcements and repairs have been built around that original decision, not instead of it. Nobody has found a better answer to where the crossing should be, because the original answer was correct. Number 7. Bradford-on-Avon Town Bridge, Wiltshire. 9 arches over the River Avon. Medieval in origin, with the 2 southernmost arches confirmed as ribbed, pointed Gothic dating from the 13th or 14th century according to the Bradford-on-Avon Museum's published records, corroborated by John Leland's 1540 observation of 9 fair arches of stone, which still stands today, carrying pedestrian and light vehicle traffic. And on the downstream parapet, a small domed structure that was first a chapel, then a town lockup, and is now a Grade I listed building sitting on top of a Grade I listed bridge. A former prison cell bolted onto a medieval river crossing, still in daily use. Both of them. The Bradford-on-Avon Heritage Open Day records describe the lockup as a structure that may have originally been a chapel, subsequently rebuilt during the 17th century as a one-room detention facility for minor offenders. It was known locally as the Blind House, a term for lockups without windows, confirmed by Historic England's listed building entry. The domed roof is the lockup's most distinctive feature, visible from the riverbank. Most people who cross Bradford-on-Avon town bridge today do not register the dome. It is small. The history sitting inside it is considerably larger. The nine-arch design reflects the specific engineering problem that the Avon posed at this point. The river runs wide and relatively shallow here. The medieval solution was not a dramatic single span. It was a long, low crossing extended laterally across the river's full width, 9 smaller arches sharing what a single arch would have struggled to carry. It is a bridge that understood its river rather than argued with it. The river has been returning the favor for 7 centuries. The town of Bradford-on rises steeply up the hillside from the water. Every view from the upper town includes the bridge. The bridge is not incidental to Bradford-on-Avon. It is the reason Bradford-on-Avon is where it is. Number 6, Old Bridge, Huntingdon, Cambridgeshire. 6 arches over the River Great Ouse. Medieval in construction, dated to circa 1300 by the capturing Cambridge Heritage Records, with toll rights granted in 1342 and a bridge chapel licensed in 1357. Still carrying vehicular traffic today, the Discover Huntingdon website confirms the bridge remains in active road use, with a parallel footbridge meters upstream for pedestrian-only use. And connected not by legend, not by local tradition, but by simple geography to one of the most consequential figures in English history. Oliver Cromwell was born in Huntingdon on April 25, 1599. This is not disputed. He was educated here at the Huntingdon Grammar School. He represented the town in Parliament. He signed the death warrant of King Charles I. He became Lord Protector of England, Scotland, and Ireland, the man who made England a republic and then declined to make himself its king. He grew up in a town that already had a medieval bridge over the Great Ouse, a bridge that was past its 3rd century by the time Cromwell was old enough to walk across it unaccompanied. There is no documented record of a specific occasion on which Cromwell used this bridge, because nobody was recording the daily movements of a Huntingdon farmer's son in the early 1600s. The geography does not require documentation. Huntingdon is not a large town. The bridge was the primary crossing of the river. Cromwell lived here for the first 3 decades of his life. The arithmetic is persuasive without being provable. The Great Ouse floods extensively. Multiple medieval bridges on comparable rivers in this region did not survive comparable conditions. This one did. The pointed arch handling variable water pressure more efficiently than the semicircular Roman form is the most likely structural reason. The river has been testing that conclusion repeatedly for several centuries and has not yet found a flaw in it. Number 5, Trinity Bridge, Crowland, Lincolnshire. Built between 1360 and 1390, according to Wikipedia and the Exploring GB Heritage Record, both citing the same construction range, corroborated by the Amusing Planet documentary account. 3 bridge arms meeting at a single central apex. A triangular bridge designed to span the confluence of 2 rivers. The rivers were redirected as part of the 17th century Fenland drainage works. The bridge now stands in the middle of a road junction in the town of Crowland, crossing nothing. And people walk over it every single day. Absorb that for a moment. The bridge exists. It is a Grade I listed scheduled ancient monument. It sits in a road junction in Lincolnshire. There is no water under it. There has been no water under it for approximately 3.5 centuries. Pedestrians climb 3 steps from the pavement, cross the apex, and descend 3 steps on the other side. The entire crossing takes approximately 11 seconds. At the end of those 11 seconds, you have crossed a 14th century bridge over rivers that were drained before your great-great-great-grandparents were born. At the apex, a carved stone figure sits worn by 6 centuries of weather to near abstraction. Historians have offered differing interpretations, some reading it as Christ in majesty, others as a representation of the Trinity, according to Wikipedia's article on the bridge. The carving was a theological statement built into the geometry of a functional crossing. The rivers it spanned answered to gravity. The builder apparently answered to something they considered higher. The rivers are gone. The builder is gone. The bridge stands in a road junction in Lincolnshire and pedestrians cross it on their way to the shops. Its survival depends entirely on a culture that continues to agree it matters. So far, that agreement is holding. Number 4. Warkworth Bridge, Northumberland. Late 14th century construction over the River Coquette. The Warkworth village historical records suggest a construction date of 1379. 3 arches. And at the southern end, a medieval gatehouse tower still standing, still intact, making this one of only 2 surviving fortified medieval bridges in England, and the only one where the original gatehouse remains attached. The bridge was closed to vehicular traffic in 1965 when a new modern bridge was opened immediately to the east, confirmed by the Historiette Heritage Record, the Sabre Roads Wiki, and the Warkworth Village Historical Document. The medieval bridge is now pedestrian only. The gatehouse was not decorative. It was a controlled point, for toll collection, for administrative authority over who crossed and when. Structures with institutional function attached to them get maintained across centuries in ways that purely functional structures do not. The gatehouse gave the bridge a reason to matter to every subsequent generation that might otherwise have replaced it. It worked. Warkworth Castle stands on the ridge directly above. The Percy family, among the most powerful dynasties in medieval northern England, controlled Warkworth as one of their principal seats. Henry Percy, known as Hotspur, was associated with Warkworth Castle throughout his life before his death at the Battle of Shrewsbury on July 21, 1403, confirmed by Wikipedia's article on Henry Percy. Shakespeare made him a central character in Henry IV Part 1. The bridge across the Coquette below the castle is the bridge Hotspur would have crossed. It is still the bridge pedestrians use to reach the castle today. The gatehouse survived the Percy rebellions, centuries of border conflict between England and Scotland, and the gradual dismantling of the great northern estates. The stone around the interior arch shows marks consistent with decades of vehicle contact from the centuries before 1965. The medieval gatehouse is now being navigated by pedestrians. It has adapted to that transition with the same indifference it brought to every previous century. Number 3. Devil's Bridge, Kirkby, Lonsdale, Cumbria. 3 arches over the River Lune. Construction date estimated by Historic England's National Heritage List entry at later medieval date. Regional historians and the Kirkby Lonsdale Tourism Authority both place construction in the 12th or 13th century, with some sources extending the range into the early 14th. The documentary record does not permit more precision than that range. A scheduled ancient monument. Closed to vehicles in the 20th century. Now pedestrian only. And standing in a landscape that John Ruskin wrote about with specific and recorded admiration. The Tudor Treasure's historical account of Devil's Bridge quotes an early description confirming 3 ribbed arches, the center arch 12 yards from the water. Historic England's listing confirms the 3 arches are unequal in span, the central arch wider than the 2 flanking ones. That asymmetry is not a structural accident. It is the practical solution to a specific problem. The central arch was designed to carry the Lune's full flood volume while the flanking arches handle the river at normal flow. The builder read the Lune carefully. They read it correctly. 8 or 9 centuries later, the Lune is still crossing under those arches on exactly the terms that reading established. Ruskin's praise for the view from the bridge's parapet, the Lune Valley opening westward from the crossing point, is documented in his writing. J.M.W. Turner visited the Kirkby Lonsdale area and painted the surrounding landscape on multiple recorded occasions. The landscape they documented is the landscape visible from the parapet today. What Ruskin wrote about and Turner painted, you can stand in the middle of right now. The name Devil's Bridge belongs to a widespread tradition of English folk naming. According to local legend, a bridge built with this quality of craft and this apparent permanence must have had assistance beyond ordinary human capability. Historians do not take the legend literally. It is, however, an honest record of how impressive the engineering appeared to later generations who could not explain it. The legend is a compliment wearing the costume of a ghost story. When the Lune floods, the sound from the bridge parapet stops conversation completely. The bridge is not audibly concerned. Number 2. Elvet Bridge, Durham. Construction began in AD 1160 under Bishop Hugh de Puiset, also known as Bishop Pudsey, who held the bishopric of Durham from 1153 to 1195. This is confirmed by Wikipedia's article on Elvet Bridge, the co-curate heritage record at Newcastle University, and the Durham City Cab's historical guide, all citing the same start date and bishop. The bridge spans the River Wear at the eastern approach to Durham's medieval peninsula and has carried pedestrian traffic across the Wear for over 860 years without a recorded break in use. On October 17, 1346, an invading Scottish army led by King David II was defeated at the Battle of Neville's Cross, fought on high ground half a mile to the west of Durham, confirmed by Wikipedia and Historic UK's published account. David II was captured during the engagement. Durham's peninsula, the city's medieval heart, is enclosed by the River Wear on 3 sides. Elvet Bridge was one of the primary crossings into the city from the eastern bank. A captured king crossed this bridge. The same bridge carries Durham University students to their morning lectures today. By 1347, according to the Durham City Cab's historical guide, records show shops and stalls built directly on the bridge, with owners paying rent to the bishopric. The Durham World Heritage Site's architecture pages confirm the practice. The bridge would have felt like a bustling medieval street rather than a river crossing. The buildings are gone. The widths where they stood can still be read in the parapet geometry. The bridge had been built wide enough to carry street-level commerce on its back, and that structural decision from the 12th century is part of the reason the bridge remains load-bearing now. The Wear runs through a gorge below the bridge steep enough to feel deliberate, and it was. Durham's peninsula was defensible precisely because of that geography. The bridge has been making the connection between the peninsula and the eastern bank for longer than most English institutions have existed. Number 1. Framwellgate Bridge, Durham. The crossing at the western approach to Durham's medieval peninsula. Historical sources associate the original construction with Ranulf Flambard, who held the bishopric of Durham from 1099 until his death in 1128, confirmed by Wikipedia's article on Ranulf Flambard, the Durham World Heritage Sites Bridges page, and the Durham City Plaques record. The current structure was rebuilt in the early 15th century after flood damage, under Bishop Thomas Langley, confirmed by the Durham World Heritage Site and the Durham City Plaques documentation. Wikipedia's article on Framwellgate Bridge confirms it is today a fully pedestrianized crossing, the primary pedestrian route along Durham's western axis. Flambard did not build a bridge where a bridge was merely convenient. He built it where a bridge would give the bishopric of Durham control over the primary western approach to the city and the market commerce that came with it. The bishop controlled the bridge. The bishop therefore controlled access to the market. Through access to the market, he controlled a significant portion of the city's economic life. The bridge was an instrument of power built in stone, and it worked exactly as intended. On October 17, 1346, the same day that Elvet Bridge received a captured Scottish king, the Battle of Neville's Cross required the movement of English forces through Durham's western approach. The logistics of a medieval military engagement in a peninsula city ran through every available crossing. Framwellgate Bridge was among them, confirmed by the geographic logic of Durham's river topography. The crossing that participated in a medieval military campaign is now where students collect their morning coffee and cross reading their phones. The bridge has absorbed that transition with complete indifference. The stones underfoot are not the original medieval stones. Stone wears, mortar fails, and a bridge that is actually used rather than preserved behind ropes requires ongoing maintenance. The surface has been replaced incrementally across 9 centuries of continuous use. But the arches, the piers, the placement in the river, the geometry of the crossing, these reflect decisions made when Henry I was on the throne of England. They have not been bettered because they have not needed to be. Here is what Framwellgate Bridge forces you to confront, if you stand on it long enough. The heritage model, the museum approach, the rope, the ruin, the visitor center, is a form of stopping. You stop the thing in order to save it. The logic is sound. It also surrenders something that cannot be recovered once it is gone. Continuous use is not a condition you can restore. You either have it or you have lost it permanently. Framwellgate has never been stopped. It has been repaired, rebuilt in sections, repointed, patched, and monitored, but never, not once across 9 centuries, permanently closed. Every morning since the early 12th century, someone has crossed it. That is not the result of a heritage designation. It is not the outcome of a conservation grant. It is the simple, unbroken fact of a structure still doing exactly what it was built to do. You cannot replicate that continuity in an exhibition. You cannot restore it once it ends. Durham still has it, not because Durham set out to protect it, but because the bridge was never given a sufficient reason to stop. These bridges did not survive because England valued them. Bakewell survived because it was more practical to maintain than replace. East Farleigh survived because the Medway's flood behavior gave its medieval engineers few alternatives. Crowland survived the complete disappearance of the rivers it was built to span and found itself preserved by the very uselessness that should have ended it. Framwellgate survived because a 12th-century bishop placed it with such precision that every subsequent century of urban development simply grew around his decision. Nobody, in 900 years, has found a better answer to the question of where to cross the Wear at that point. The bridges that did not survive, and there were many, were lost not primarily to flood or structural failure, but to money. Every era of prosperity brought demolition. The medieval was replaced by the Tudor by the Georgian by the Victorian by the modern. The bridges still standing are the ones that improvement could never quite build a convincing case against. Every person who crossed one of these bridges this morning was standing for a few seconds on the 14th century. They didn't look down. That is precisely the point. If you have crossed one of these bridges, if you have stood on medieval stone over moving water and felt something you could not quite name, tell me in the comments. I want to know what the crossing did to your sense of time. We cover the history moving quietly under your feet. Subscribe if that is the kind of thing you want to be paying attention to.